On this week's show, what a mess. COVID collateral damage includes a pile of plastic that is trashing the USA and poisoning the seas. How did pandemic protocols backfire? And how are we at risk? But first, think Afghanistan is in the rearview mirror? Think again. And where's the next hotspot? I'm Holland Cook in Washington. This is The Big Picture on RT America. No matter how old you are, the United States has been at war most of your life, if not your entire life.
I stand here today for the first time in 20 years with the United States not at war. We've turned the page. All the unmatched strength, energy, and commitment, will, and resources of our nation are now fully and squarely focused on what's ahead of us.
What is ahead of us? Let's ask John Sitilides, geopolitical strategist at Trilogy Advisors and a diplomacy consultant to the Department of State, and former Pentagon official and RT contributor Michael Maloof. John, after the USA's bungled COVID response, then January 6th, then that abrupt Afghanistan exit, and with nonstop noise here in Washington, do our friends now trust us less, and do our foes now fear us less?
It depends on which allies and which adversaries of the United States we're talking about, Holland. If we just look at events of the last several weeks, we see that the United States has announced a new security alliance with the United Kingdom and with Australia, the AUKUS agreement. We just had a convening of the Quad here in Washington, D.C. with the United States, the Indian Prime Minister, the Japanese Prime Minister, and the Australian Prime Minister working together to build out free democratic societies and to uphold free and open shipping in the Indo-Pacific region. And then in other parts of the world, whether we're talking about the Middle East and the South China Sea region and the like, we have very strong friends and allies. But there are those countries that will remain adversaries of the United States, no matter what the conditions of governance are here in Washington, D.C. Primarily, unfortunately, that's China. That will include Iran, that will include North Korea, and there's nothing that Washington can do, for the most part, that can help move those countries away from their adversarial stance.
Michael, embarrassing as our bug out was, most Americans wanted out. And are we naive to heave a sigh of relief that Afghanistan is in the USA's rearview mirror?
Well, we shouldn't be naive. We should be watching it very, very carefully. We still have a serious and growing terrorist threat from there. And as a result of our rapid departure, abrupt departure from Afghanistan, it has incentivized other terrorist groups. And in effect, Afghanistan is becoming a terrorist state.
Ouch. Mightier countries are mighty interested in the lithium motherlode Afghanistan sits atop. John, with a collapsing economy and massive brain drain there, are Taliban hardliners a doomed government?
That's going to be a critical question in the months and years ahead, Holland. And governance is moderation. Governance involves concessions to domestic parties, to international actors and international organizations. And this is, I think, going to be an issue of jihadist purity among not just the Taliban, but also a resurgent al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, the Haqqani network, and the Islamic State Khorasan. And if there is going to be a civil war based on jihadist purity, you may see Haqqani and Islamic State turn against the Taliban because they may decide, as Michael just noted with the rare earths issue from China, that you may have the Taliban remaining relatively silent on the mistreatment of at least 1 million Uyghur Muslims in Western China, as well as issues, again, with the treatment of women in Afghanistan and others that will become very problematic for a governing Taliban against more radical extremist jihadist groups inside of Afghanistan.
When you talk about the treatment of women there, how susceptible, how sensitive are the Taliban to criticism from elsewhere in the world? Do they care? Do they have to?
That's going to depend on how international organizations may qualify any international aid that the Afghan government is highly dependent upon right now. As you note, the economy is a shambles. We may see widespread famine in Afghanistan during the coming months that may be compounded by a very deep winter freeze. So the extent to which the Taliban is going to be dependent on international organizations for vital aid, they may make some minor concessions to the extent possible compatible with their particular version of Islam. But that may be the door opening for other organizations to begin to go after the Taliban and government.
We are speaking with longtime Pentagon official Michael Maloof and geopolitical strategist John Sitilides. A year ago, you might have seen this meme bounce around social media. And if you're hearing this as a podcast, the graphic is a map that shows dozens of U.S. military bases surrounding the Gulf. And the caption is, Iran wants war. Look how close they put their country to our military bases. Michael, when you and I were here a year ago, Iran was on the front burner, and that's still a pretty rough neighborhood. But with everything else on our plate, American citizens' attention is elsewhere. Is Iran any less troublesome today?
Troublesome, no. I think it's turning its view and worldview toward an alternative world order, looking more eastward now. They did a major deal with the Chinese, and they're looking to basically get out from under the U.S. sanctions. Whether or not the U.S. and Iran can actually work out an arrangement to reestablish the JCPOA, I think Iran has moved on, and they're going to be charting a greater course. They just were admitted into the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. That is huge. That is huge. And that links them much more closely with China, Russia, Turkey, Pakistan, and a plethora of other countries in Central Asia.
So with friends in the neighborhood there, our sanctions have less teeth, right?
Yeah, that is correct. I think it's going to diminish the impact of U.S. sanctions. We've overused them.
Gotcha. On what's called Mischief Reef in the South China Sea, there is a military-grade airstrip and anti-aircraft and missile installations. The U.S. position is that under international law, a place that is submerged in its natural state, as this was before China built the island up, is not entitled to a territorial sea. This is a stance our naval maneuvers are testing there, half a world away. John, where do you see this standoff heading, and who are the other stakeholders over there?
Well, you just pointed out Holland may be one of the most critical geopolitical flashpoints on planet Earth for the months and possibly years to come. And I'd like to provide some context here for your viewers first, because it's very important to note that this is an international waterway, the South China Sea, and through it traverses about 1/3 of all international commercial traffic and about 80% of the oil and natural gas that literally lubricates the Chinese, Japanese, Taiwanese, and South Korean economies. There are also vast fisheries for an affluent, high-protein diet for the people of Asia, and also potentially vast oil and natural gas deposits beneath the seabed of the South China Sea. And China is now declaring these international waters, about 1.3 million square miles, as essentially a Chinese lake, all at the expense of about 8 or 9 countries that all have significant coastlines on the South China Sea. And ironically, China's actions, which are unlawful regarding the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, would essentially threaten the free and open shipping system that has enabled it, China, to achieve this astonishing growth and level of wealth today after 20 years in the World Trade Organization. And now China seeks to supplant that same system and to declare all of these smaller countries to its south essentially as tributary countries, recognizing, respecting, and bowing down to China's dominance of the Asian continent.
Wow. Michael, while we're in the neighborhood, let's do an Indo-Pacific lightning round. In this order. Status report, Japan.
Well, Japan is going to be tightening up on its own defenses. We're going to see that. The United States, along with Japan, as well as with South Korea, even India, they're trying to basically contain China, and you're going to see much closer cooperation among those nations. And of course, you got North Korea that South Korea is still worried about. You're going to be seeing South Korea itself is going to be trying to work with the U.S. much more closely, and it has issues with China. You have the Philippines. They have real serious issues with China in terms of access rights and mineral rights. That is confounding the problem in the East-South China Sea standoff with those countries, as John pointed out. India itself, it has designs for the same area, but it also has a competitor which is Pakistan. Pakistan is very close to China, and they are competing as well. So United States is drawing much more closely to India as a consequence. Now, this is going to have a ripple effect. You talk about Indo-Pacific being a crisis area in the future. This is going to have a spillover effect into Central Asia, inevitably.
The world's getting smaller.
Very much.
Long time no see Kim Jong-un until this svelte new version reappeared recently, and they've been testing armaments. So what's he up to?
Well, he's trying to be ever ready. He's trying to basically leverage against South Korea and trying to basically get the United States out of his hair. And he's trying to keep, in South Korea and North Korea are looking to try and compromise on things. And it looks like they may have some compatibility. But South Korea has got to, in exchange, stop its maneuver activities with the military maneuver activities with the U.S.
No real consequence of that photo op with Trump, though, huh?
No, I don't think so.
Nothing really changed.
No.
John, I got about a minute left. We were talking hotspots. Pick a place. What keeps you up at night? What aren't we looking at, or I should say, where aren't we watching that we should be?
Well, I'm glad you asked about the South China Sea, and I'm glad you spoke to Michael about what's happening on the Korean Peninsula, because it's essentially a mini arms race there between North Korea and South Korea, which is the first non-nuclear country to now launch sea-based ballistic cruise missiles. And all of this is happening while Japan is undergoing a political leadership change in the next several weeks. And I'm going to switch to the other side of the continent quickly, also Holland, because we have a new German government, potentially, but we don't know how long it'll take for it to actually come together. This could take weeks, it could take months into early 2022, and we don't know whether this gives Russia an opportunity to scramble and to see how it further destabilizes countries in the Baltics or continues to undermine political democracy in the European Union.
I'm glad you pinpointed that. Germany could be the story to watch. John Sitilides, Michael Maloof, thank you again for stepping into the big picture. When we were told it was a novel coronavirus, we went into better safe than sorry mode. How has Mother Earth suffered, and how will we? This is the big picture on RT America.
I'm Jesse Ventura. As governor of Minnesota, I was on the front lines against the political duopoly that strangles American politics. I'm still in that fight. Question more.
In an ocean of stories, even the news worth knowing can overwhelm you. You could even lose your way. I know you want it all, so let me bring you the best. It's easy. Just press play.
May your questions birth new questions, numberless as stars, and endless as the sea, and bring you all insight, distance, depth, and more. Lift your eyes to all that remains in question.
I like it when the host asks a question to the guests and then actually listens to the guest's answer and then reacts to that answer. Hey folks, Dennis Miller here. I've got a new show.
Dear viewer, thank you for finding finally changing the channel. I understand you're tired of networks that blur news with views. You're tired of commentary presented as fact and facts presented as commentary. They are not the same, no matter what the partisan hack want you to think. You know me. I'm famous for my views, and you'll get them, and the news, and me. Yours truly, Scotty Nell.
In May of 2021, the remains of a 20-ton chunk of a Chinese rocket came crashing into Earth. It got me thinking, just how much stuff is up there? And how did it get there? And do I really need to also be worried that some piece of space debris could fall out of the sky? And how big a problem is this? I'm William Shatner, and I don't understand. Available on RT America and Portable TV.
The pandemic shutdown took a terrible human toll, and now Mother Earth suffers. Here's RT Boom Bust co-host and investigative journalist Ben Swan.
Well, hauling PPE or personal protective equipment is really just the beginning. Consider also all of that plastic takeaway food containers that have increased exponentially over the last 18 months. Or how about all the bubble wrap that is used by companies in order to ship products directly to homes? All of this has increased, as I said, by an order of magnitude, and now it's creating a huge problem. Keep in mind, all of these products are plastic, and every piece of plastic begins life as a fossil fuel. The economic slowdown has punctured demand for oil. The massive increase in consumption of plastics and packaging during the pandemic has produced mountains of waste. In some cases, fears of COVID-19 have led to work stoppages of recycling facilities. Some reusable material has been junked or burned instead. So what kind of effect is all of this having? Well, a recent study found that during the last year and a half, 16,000 fewer tons of recyclable material went into circulation. That comes out to about $1.2 million every month in revenue lost for waste picker associations.
In the greater Jakarta area, there are 13,000 workers who collect and sell plastic waste. Even before the pandemic, our workers were already burdened by declining prices, economic crises, and government bans on plastics. These factors shut down many of the industries we would typically sell plastics to. COVID-19 lockdowns have only made our business that much more difficult.
But an even bigger problem? Because of the fear of the virus, a huge amount of personal protective equipment has been misclassified as hazardous. That material often isn't allowed into the normal trash, so a lot of it is dumped in burn pits or as litter. The United Nations Environment Program estimated last year that healthcare facilities around the world were producing about 7.5 pounds of COVID-related medical waste per person per day worldwide. It said that in Jakarta, Indonesia, and 4 other Asian megacities, the rate of overall healthcare waste disposal had risen by about 500%. And then there's the issue of syringes and other truly hazardous medical waste that may end up in the wrong places. In the world's poorest countries, this creates a whole new set of problems. Take, for instance, Bangladesh, where tens of thousands of people pick through garbage every single day just to survive. Well, in Bangladesh, for instance, a new report shows that nearly all of the districts in that country fail to properly dispose of syringes, and instead, they simply go into the garbage, which creates a whole new set of hazards for people already living on the edge. For The Big Picture, I'm Ben Swan.
Thanks, Ben. When you are out and about today, look down. You're going to see discarded face masks right there on the sidewalk. Think the street is a mess? How are the seas? Let's ask my fellow Rhode Islander, Richard Vevers, founder of the nonprofit Ocean Agency, whose mission is accelerating ocean science and conservation. Richard, you are in breathtakingly scenic Newport, and I live on Block Island, so we from the ocean state get it. But tell people who are watching and listening in Kansas and Kiev how what's happening to the ocean threatens them.
Well, I think it's very easy to forget that the ocean is really fundamental to life on Earth. It's, our life support system. I mean, it produces most of the oxygen we breathe. It produces the water that we need to grow food, and it's really essential to life. And we're fundamentally changing the ocean. We're changing its chemistry, we're changing its temperature, we're altering the biodiversity, and it's impacting its ability to support life on Earth. And it's also impacting its ability to do something really important at the moment, which is controlling the impacts of climate change.
We are seeing the heartbreaking images of what should be beautiful beaches, sadly littered, and necropsy photos of fish stomachs full of colorful plastic. And we've heard that there's a pile of floating plastic out there the size of Texas. Richard, where's all this coming from? Is it Indonesia? Is it cruise ships?
There is a lot of, well, it's a complex issue, ocean plastics. There is a lot that is coming out of about 10 rivers in Asia. The Yangtze, for example, in China, there's about 1.5 million tons of plastic flows into the ocean through that river system. But as I said, it's a lot more complicated. There's a lot of microplastics going into the ocean, and pretty much everyone on the planet is contributing to that. It's in our clothes, it's in our wash products, it is in all sorts of products that we use, and it ends up into the ocean. It's even on the breakdown of tires on the roads that is washing into this ocean. And it's all getting into the food chain and eventually ending up on our plates.
And we're killing critters out there, too. We are disposing of fishing nets and other stuff like that designed to capture the critters. And that stuff gets abandoned, and animals get caught in there and are dying out in the ocean, aren't they?
Yes, I mean, ghost nets is a huge issue. Often the nets, it's easier to discard the net when it gets snagged, and it floats around in the ocean and it carries on doing what it's meant to do, surviving a very long time catching fish and other animals. So there's a lot of organizations putting a lot of effort to try and locate ghost nets and pulling them out of the ocean.
Ghost nets. We're speaking with the Ocean Agency founder, Richard Vivers, who appears in the award-winning film Chasing Coral.
Coral is a fundamental part of a huge ecosystem.
They continue living as long as their environment allows them to.
There's this big heat wave that's traveling around all over the world. The coral bleaches, and what you're seeing is its skeleton underneath. It's like your body temperature changing. That's the seriousness of the issue.
Great flick you can find on Netflix. Richard, other than screaming bloody murder about climate change to members of Congress, what can someone who is watching and listening do to help the oceans?
Well, I think one of the biggest things people can do is just treat seafood as special. So have it for special occasions. Don't eat it as an everyday product. Often we find ourselves sort of feeding tuna to cats, for example. But life in the ocean, especially sort of seafood, is really important for reducing the impacts of climate change. It basically takes carbon out of the system and poops it to the ocean floor where it's safely stored. And so by taking it out of the ocean, we're causing a double problem. It's not doing its job of removing carbon from the system, and it's releasing it instead. So just treat it in a special way, and only have it on special occasions would be my sort of biggest tip.
We who live in coastal New England gulp when we hear about overfishing. How bad a problem is it in our neck of the woods?
It's certainly a problem all over the world. There is a lot more regulation in the US than many other countries. And so we're starting to really understand the science of sustainability, but there's huge pressures to fish. And people love seafood so much that often you get a double issue of not just fishing for the species, it's the bycatch that's the issue. Prawns, for example, are renowned for being very expensive in terms of all the other life that gets taken out of the ocean while trying to fish for prawns. And that's just one species. There's a lot of bycatch issue in the ocean.
Ocean Agency's Richard Vivers, thank you for stepping into the big picture. I appreciate your time. 2016 candidate Donald Trump hollered about draining the swamp, but in its oversight report, Mapping the Swamp, a study of the administrative state fiscal year 2020, nonprofit, nonpartisan Washington watchdog OpenTheBooks.com quantifies the federal bureaucracy that President Joe Biden inherited from the Trump administration, during which the number of employees within within the executive agencies increased to a modern-day high. Among the takeaways, 2.8 million disclosed federal employees cost the American taxpayer $2.3 million per minute. Do the math. That's $1.1 billion per day. Excluding Department of Defense and U.S. Postal Service, Veterans Affairs is the largest executive agency with 400,000 some employees. So bureaucrat is not necessarily a pejorative term. Another important mission, Homeland Security, has 200,000 plus staffers. Over 7,000 federal employees earn $300,000 a year, and Uncle Sam's highest paid is Dr. Anthony Fauci, $434,312. Give him a raise. But Jeffrey Lyash, CEO of the quasi-public Tennessee Valley Authority, raked in $15.5 million in salary, retirement, and other benefits over a 2-year period. Bureaucrats average 44 days of PTO, 11 holidays, 13 sick days, and 20 vacation days. Another $225 billion in estimated compensation remains hidden and not subject to the oversight of this report, which you can read in its entirety at openthebooks.com. And that is the Big Bucks Big Picture. And thank you for watching the Big Picture. We're going to be back same time next week if you watch in real time. Otherwise, set your DVR for DirecTV channel 321. On the Dish, we're channel 280. YouTube.com/RT America is our live stream there. And all of my work is archived at youtube.com/TheBigPictureRT. And of course, you can watch us live or on demand, where you will find all our shows on the free Portable TV app in the App Store, or on Google Play, or at portable.tv. If you're a hockey fan, you're gonna love it. I am Holland Cook in Washington, and on Twitter at Holland Cook, where if you follow me, I'll follow you. Question more.